Right, thank you very much for coming, everyone, whether you've travelled near or far. Thank you very much. We're here to celebrate, as you know, 50 years of Yes, and the anniversary of everything and all the bands, all the different lineups, the music, the artwork, the personalities of the greatest rock and roll band, prog rock band in the world. Special because it's here today in the basement where it all started. So they all left here to go and do their first gig 50 years ago today. So it is a special day. Thank you for coming. I think Yes Music has given a lot to everyone, and you've taken all your different bits from it, whatever you like. But there's a lot of positivity there for a long time, and today is really a celebration of that and giving that back. So it's a fitting tribute to have this wonderful plaque and everybody that's joined in today, and some wonderful guests that we have with us as well. That's enough from me, because we've got three fantastic guests. Anthony Tunney Esquire with us, so Chris's brother is going to say a few words in a minute. Chris Welch from the Melody Maker, Yes Book with fan, Yes Book author.
I'm my greatest fan.
All around Melody Maker legend and Yes supporter for 50 years. And of course, very special guest, Bill Bruford, the original drummer, who's been here 50 years ago.
Thank you.
Very delighted to be here. Very delighted to be here and supporting this special day. So, no further ado, I'll let Tony say a few words of memories.
Okay, won't be too long, I can assure you of that. And first of all, as you can see, Chris is the one who kept the hair. I got the wrong gene on that side at least. But anyway, it's really great to be here to commemorate this momentous occasion. I don't even know whether it's behind me. Yeah, perfect. I will get out of the way in time. And quite amazingly, those of us who were around in those days are probably amazed we're all still standing here. The downside, of course, that it's 50 years further on for most of us, and we don't need reminding of at this stage of our lives. Naturally, my sister Sherry, who is here, who is my older sister. Can't believe it, but she is. And we're so sad that Chris, of course, can't be with us. Especially having been the founder member of Yes, along with John Anderson. And I'm sure Chris would have been very, really thrilled at this event to commemorate Yes's 50th anniversary. Soho, of course, is a special place in the history of Yes and many other bands, with the marquee, of course, being a pivotal point in launching the band's career. In fact, in terms of the plaque, I don't know if many of you know, but we already have a plaque for Chris round at the Soho Sanctum Hotel when we had Chris's memorial service. So any of you who want to go around there, it's in Warwick Street. And those of you who haven't seen it, it's just to the side of the hotel at the front, just commemorating Chris as his is. I remember Chris telling me the story about when he was in the Sin, actually, prior to Mabel Greer's toy shop. For those of you who know the complete history of Yes. And they were sitting in a cafe in Old Compton Street, around the corner from the Marquee, where that night they were actually supporting someone called Jimi Hendrix. They were actually meant to be supporting Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers, for those of you who might remember, who were like the hit of the day, but it was changed at the last minute. Chris didn't know why, and he didn't really know Jimi Hendrix and so forth, and he was panicking because they were on a share of the gate, thinking, well, we're not going to get much out of this tonight. And of course, being a pretty penniless band in those days, they could just about afford some lunch between them. But as they were sitting there in the front window of the cafe, the queue came all the way around from Wardour Street and stretched right outside them, to which Chris jubilantly said, well, guys, there's dessert. So, as I said, they were on the cut of the door in those particular days. I don't know if any of you were at that gig at all. Maybe not. But Chris got up on stage. He was probably about 19 then, and he looked in the first 4 rows, and all his heroes were there. John Lennon, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, Pete Townsend and Steve Winwood. So needless to say, I think he put a little bit extra in that night, but it was a very special night. So just one of those sweet stories. The rehearsal rooms, of course, where we are now in the basement of what then was the Lucky Horseshoe Cafe, also played an important part in the development of Yes Music. And although I was just that little bit young to come up to the rehearsals and wandering around the West End, my sister wasn't, and she was here to witness all of that and the discussions around, we'll just say in inverted commas, musical differences. For those of you who probably know and understand the band, John and Chris, and probably Bill, you know.
No! What are you talking about? I agree with everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And with my sister just wishing that they could just settle it all, get the thing down, and get up to the speakeasy for some drinks. So that was Cherry's fond memory. Anyway, just a couple of little anecdotes there. I don't want to go on any further.
No,
I'd like to finish by sending our many congratulations, of course, to the whole of Yes. Obviously, you are touring at the moment still. And of course, with a special thought to Chris, whose untimely demise has left a huge hole in our family's lives, and no doubt Yes fans around the world, and I'm sure including you guys.
Yeah.
So if anyone's got a drink, which I have down here, though, cheers to Yes, cheers to Chris, and also one person I forgot, of course, Pete Banks, who also demised in 2013, I think, who was also a very instrumental part in those early days. Anyway, have a great day, and I'll hand back to David.
Right. Thank you. Well done.
Well, it's great to see you all here, and also it's great for me to be here, because I have to be honest, this is the first time I've actually been in this rehearsal room, although I heard all about it from the band when I was researching my book a few years ago. And as a music journalist, it's one of my thrills really to go and hear a new band rehearsal. And one of the bands I saw was Cream, so at least I did actually get to see them at their first rehearsal. And when I first heard about Yes, it was through my colleagues at Miscellany, a guy called Tony Wilson, who told me he'd seen this marvellous band playing in the clubs around the West End, and at the Marquee, that I should go and see them. Well, I went to the Royal Albert Hall. It was Cream's farewell. I hadn't waved them all in, I then waved them all up. And who was supporting Cream? Yes, and I was actually blown away. I thought they were an astonishing group. I love them because they had all these different aspects to their music. They were playing great arrangements. They're all fine musicians, and they all chose great songs to rearrange and rework, and then of course develop their own songwriting. So anyway, that was my first introduction to seeing the band. And later I heard about this place, this rehearsal room, and it's rather strange that turn of events, because my colleague then at Melody Maker was a chap called Chris Charlesworth, who later became a news editor. And he'd been on holiday down from Skipton in Lancashire. I think it's Lancashire, isn't it?
Yorkshire. Careful.
And so I came to the Chas Club with his mate. They were just on a drinking holiday. And we met a man called John Roberts. John Roberts knew Jack Barry, who ran the Chas Club. And between them, they were helping the fledgling band that was rehearsing down here. I think John Roberts gave John Anderson 500 quid as an advance to help get up and play and rehearse here. And apparently it cost £4 a night to hire this place. And it was a hellhole. It was really very hot and very noisy. And Chris Charlesworth remembers coming here and hearing them playing it full volume. He was blown away, as amazed by what he heard. So that he really beat me to it, and he actually saw the band first. And the great thing was, of course, he took loads of photographs of them all in this very room. And I said, great, you got the photographs? And he lost them all. God knows where they are. They're out there somewhere. So historically speaking, you can find treasure troves. But then, of course, after seeing at the Royal Albert Hall and that sort of band playing all around the world, including a great trip to Switzerland and Ireland. And I won't go into the Irish story, you can read about that in the book, but that was very fun. With the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, the Nice and Yes, all on tour together. And that ended in with a catastrophic seeing at Pork Abattoir. A great moment in Yes history. But it's great to be here today, and it's marvellous that a park has been unveiled, and also it's nice that we can pay tribute to Chris Esquire, and think about Peter Banks as well, who all met up here. And this was the birthplace of Yes, so very historic place, and historic gathering. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Say a few words for us.
Say lovely words. I have very few words to say because your guest earlier speakers have said a lot and know more about, can remember more, I think, than I can probably remember of being down here. I mean, this is very, very smart Shishi and frou-frou now, but of course it was really a bit of a stinkhole in our day, and it was the same, and it was very hot, exactly like this, even on a freezing winter's day, it was very hot. No windows, of course, so no air conditioning. I remember we smoked like chimneys, of course. I remember I had a bass drum, and the bass drum was filling up without the front hood on with empty cigarette packets. And I thought, if this bass drum, I'm going to leave the group or we're going to leave here, one way or another, if this bass drum gets full with cigarette packets. And sure enough, it didn't quite, and we managed to get out. Number 6, and nobody will remember what number 6 cigarettes were. So we smoked lots of those. It was a permanent fug. There were, as Tony did mention, there was the occasional musical difference. I can't understand what it was all about at all. We would have been hammering home, the difference between G natural and G sharp. Of course, in some sort of micro sense. And one day wrangling with Chris on an impossible kind of and useless discussion going nowhere. It was kind of 5 goals all. We had to have a shootout of some sort. Chris put down his bass and with exasperation said, and exactly how long, we didn't know each other very well, how long have you been in the music business? Ha! Got in my call. A year, I said. And he looked at me and went, 3 years. So, 3 years was a lifetime in those days. Absolutely amazing, reflecting on coming here today that 50 years later, we're all here and fairly chipper, as far as I can make out, which is all pretty good. Chris Welch, of course, was an early sponsor of the band, which is really wonderful to have somebody on side, a melody maker, who seemed to get the music, seemed to enjoy it, which was really wonderful. So we feted him and brought him on lots of Irish tours,
yes,
as you rightly said. I think probably before I rip this, I've been brought in at vast expense, of course. There's no expense today to rip this black thing off there. I just wondered if there's any questions you'd like to ask me. I mean, I'm here sort of standing about, not doing much. And if there's any questions you'd like to ask me about the early days of Yes, by all means do. 2 or 3 questions. Don't be shy now. But we've probably heard most of it. Yeah.
Can I just ask what it was like when you was recording Close to the Edge?
What it was like? Recording, well, it wasn't like anything really. It was a bit like Paul Simon doing and Art Garfunkel doing Bridge Over Troubled Water, which we took as a template and thought, well, if they've taken 3 months on that, by golly, we're going to take 3 months and 2 weeks on Close to the Edge, because we wanted to be pretty much bigger and better than anybody. It was hard work, for sure, and all tape editing, an awful lot of tape editing. If you watch the master tape go around now, like 2-inch master tape go around now, like every time I flip my fingers, there's an edit, which one of those is an 8-bar section or so. So, it's really glued together, because we didn't really know how Close to the Edge was going to sound until we finished it. Then we kind of learned how to play it.
Once you had the finished master and you listened through it, did you have any idea of the impact that it would have?
No, not at all.
Well, you were confident that you thought it was really good. You've done your best with it.
Yeah, I think we all thought it was good, but in a very vague way. You know, nobody thought it would sell a lot. That's a different thing, necessarily. I was pretty unfamiliar with kind of management and record company. I was very young. Nobody really knew how that worked. Was somebody calling Atlantic Records in the States? Did they know who we were, even? A little earlier than that, I remember just before our first trip to America, Atlantic Records, a receptionist thought we were a folk group. So it's quite easy to misjudge things in those days. So no, I don't think we knew it was going to be successful, and fantastic it is too. It still gives people a lot of pleasure. I think it still seems to sell as many today as it did back then. Sure.
Did you want to continue with ABWH, or did you want to get involved in union?
I would continue with ABWH. I wasn't keen on union at all. It seemed to me an unnecessary kind of overweight of having two bands melded into one. So that was a band that was put together for political reasons, I think. You know, what do you do after you've done ABWH? Well, people like Brian Lane are going to say, well, get the other Yes and watch them together. That'll work, won't it? You know, which is the way politics and music work, I think.
But what about the live aspect of it? Union?
Live aspect of ABWH?
Of union.
Not my cup of tea, particularly, but I did what was required, which was, you know, perform enthusiastically. The nicest review on that, I thought, was the two drummers, Alan White and Bill Bruford, being described as me being the hollandaise sauce to Alan's meat and potatoes. I thought, that's a good journalist. Guy who comes up with a phrase, you know, on a metaphor. Always lovely.
Was it Chris who wrote that?
No, it wasn't Chris.
No.
Shame, Chris. Shame. One for you.
Do you have any particular memories of recording Union?
Recording Union?
Yeah.
Oh, we're on a Union thing here.
Well, equal.
I do, and it's the early days of computers, you know, and I think I probably mentioned this in a book I wrote about my own story, and it was the early days of computers, and you would play something that was quite good. It was the first time, I mean, everybody does this now, but I didn't know in those days. You'd play something, and you'd say to the control booth, how was that? You know, did you like that take? Which is how I've been brought up. You know, does the producer like it? Can we go home now? Is basically what you're saying. And did the producer like it? And he'd say, it's good enough. And I remember going ballistic, saying, good enough for what? and he said, well, good enough for me to fix. So everything was fixed, because suddenly automation of everything, suddenly, beautiful fixing. So just get these guys to make some noise, get Rick Wakeman to play every note on the keyboard, right? And then we'll stitch it together and put it in a computer, and of course you can move stuff around a lot. So to me, partly because I know the process, it appears rather stiff and what is called perfect. Yeah. Now I don't like perfect at all. So that's going to go down like a tube. So anybody at the back there? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I think most of us here probably think you're the best drummer ever.
Well, you're very kind. That's a mistake.
Well, it's true.
But you're entitled to your opinion.
That's my opinion. I wonder, do you ever still play the drums at home?
I don't play anymore, no. There's a kid there, and occasionally, you know, some poor distraught mother who's got a 17-year-old who thinks he's going to be in the music business and be a star and everything. And she wheels him up for me to kind of assess his future. You know, can he play the drums? And usually the answer is no. But once in a while, you know, a 17-year-old walks through the door, is just fantastic. And you go, music, and he will no doubt do well. No, I don't play anymore. I sort of have an academic career.
Earthworks is nice.
Good. Appreciate that. Well, we can talk about that over canapes. Yeah.
You've often said that you're much more comfortable in an extemporizing, improvising, looser kind of framework. Did you ever have any attempt to try and get Yes to move in that direction, or was that a lost cause?
No, I didn't think we would try that. It didn't seem that people would be comfortable doing that. They would immediately probably rubbish the outcome, which might not be very good. But I don't mind starting with things that aren't very good and then making them better. So, but it somehow is in the bloodstream, I think, whether you feel comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's a kind of category of musician that I feel immediately simpatico with. Guys who don't mind really where the music goes. Yes, on the other hand, was a very organised group. Very organised, and I would stupidly try and play differently every night, which of course irritated the heck out of everybody. The way it goes. One last question, maybe?
If you had your time over again, would you have done so much with electronic percussion?
Oh yeah, sure. It's one of those tricky questions, isn't it? So hypothetical. I wouldn't do anything differently. I think I've been phenomenally lucky with the number of people I've played with, and the interest I've had. I've had a fair listening. I'm not one of these grumpy old musicians who's going to say, "But nobody ever listened to my records. Nobody ever bought my records." I'm not one of those guys at all. I've had a fabulously fair hearing, so I thought I'd quit while I was ahead, as it were. At 60, it seemed enough for me.
Good for you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Now then, the big moment arrives. Are we going to do this together, or is it me?
I think it's mostly you.
It's
Ready?
mostly me.
Are you all ready?
3, 2, 1, please.
3, 2, 1.
Way! Look at that! Whoa! If you can't read, the English progressive rock band formed here in the basement of the then lucky Horseshoe Cafe with an correct accent. Yes, left here to play their first gig on the 3rd of August 1968. It's a bit like the Pilgrim Fathers, isn't it? Yeah. Left Plymouth Harbour to arrive in the United States. The 3rd of August 1968, sponsored by David Watkinson and YesWorld.com. Thank you, David. Very nice.
Well, thank you all for coming. Take your pictures here. What we're going to do is leave the hot room, go upstairs, get some cold drinks. We're going to set this up for the people who